The alien drill sergeant had seen thousands of recruits over the years, warriors from dozens of species, each one struggling to endure the brutal training regimen of the Galactic Expeditionary Force. It was designed to break cadets down, to strip them of weakness until only hardened soldiers remained. But nothing in all his years had prepared him for what he was about to witness. The training course was a nightmare by design. Towering obstacles, shifting gravity fields, razor-thin balance beams suspended over energy pits, every challenge tested speed, strength, and endurance. Even the most advanced species in the galaxy took weeks, sometimes months, to master it. But today was different. Standing at the starting line was a single human cadet, just one among many who had been reluctantly accepted into the program. The other recruits, mostly towering reptilian brutes and agile multi-limbed predators, had already begun their trials, some failing spectacularly while others barely scraped through. But the human, a young man named Jack, showed no signs of hesitation. He cracked his knuckles, rolled his shoulders, and then, he was off. At first, the drill sergeant barely paid attention. Humans were new to the galactic ranks, their capabilities still largely unknown. The assumption was that they were weaker, less evolved, an anomaly in the grand order of things. But then, as the minutes passed, the murmurs started. The drill sergeant's four glowing eyes narrowed. The course should have slowed Jack down. It should have forced him to stop, to reassess, to struggle. But he didn't struggle. Jack moved with an almost unnatural efficiency. His instincts were razor-sharp, ducking at the exact moment a plasma bolt fired over his head, gripping the unstable footholds as if they were solid ground, launching himself across gaps that should have taken precise calculations. He didn't pause. He didn't second-guess. He just moved, fast, fluid, unstoppable. The other recruits had stopped their own trials, watching in stunned silence. Even the veterans, those who had barely survived this course before, stared in disbelief. The drill sergeant's chest tightened as Jack approached the final challenge, a gravity well designed to slow even the strongest warriors to a crawl. It required brute force and perfect timing, something that took most recruits countless failed attempts to overcome. Jack didn't hesitate. He adjusted his stance, took a single deep breath, and then leapt, his body twisting in midair as he angled himself perfectly. He landed with a roll, popped back onto his feet, and sprinted across the finish line. Silence. The drill sergeant's voice, usually booming with authority, caught in his throat. He checked the time. 1 hour. Impossible. The record was 6. Even the best warriors had barely finished under 7. But this human had just shattered every expectation. Jack dusted off his uniform, breathing steadily as if the course had been nothing more than a casual jog. He looked up at the drill sergeant and gave a small, confident grin. "Was that good enough, sir?" The drill sergeant's hands clenched at his sides. For the first time in his long career, he had no idea how to respond. The silence stretched between them, thick with something unspoken. Jack stood tall, his expression calm, but the drill sergeant could see it, the sharpness in his eyes, the quiet confidence of someone who knew exactly what he had just done. The other recruits, a mix of hardened veterans and fresh cadets, looked between Jack and their instructor, waiting for some kind of reaction. But the drill sergeant said nothing. He couldn't. His mind was still trying to process what had just happened. This wasn't normal. No species, not even the strongest, fastest, or most battle-hardened, had ever done what Jack had just done. The course was designed to break recruits, to test them past their limits, to expose weakness. But Jack hadn't struggled. He hadn't even looked tired. It was as if the challenges had been mere inconveniences to him. One of the recruits, a massive reptilian warrior with dark, armored scales, finally broke the silence. "That's not possible," he muttered, his voice a low growl. "He cheated. He must have." Jack turned his head slightly, a smirk playing at his lips. "You're welcome to try it yourself," he said, voice steady. The reptilian snarled but said nothing more. He knew the truth. Everyone did. Jack hadn't cheated. There had been no shortcuts, no tricks. He had simply been better, faster, smarter, more instinctive. The drill sergeant's fingers twitched. He was trained to spot anomalies, to understand when something was out of place. And Jack was out of place. He shouldn't have been able to do this. His file had listed him as an average human cadet, no special augmentations, no cybernetic enhancements, nothing that would explain what he had just done. And yet, here he was. The sergeant took a slow step forward, his heavy boots thudding against the ground. His voice, when he finally spoke, was quieter than usual. "Where did you learn to move like that?" Jack shrugged. "Nowhere special." It was a lie. The drill sergeant knew it immediately. Jack's movements weren't something that could be picked up casually. They were too precise, too calculated. Every decision he had made on that course had been instinctual, but not reckless. He had understood the terrain, the obstacles, the patterns of the shifting platforms, all without hesitation. This wasn't just talent. It was something else. The other instructors had gathered now, watching from the edges of the training yard. Some whispered among themselves, exchanging glances filled with uncertainty. The drill sergeant knew what they were thinking, knew that word of this would spread. The higher-ups would want answers. The Galactic Expeditionary Force had accepted humans into their ranks as an experiment, nothing more. They were a young species, untested in large-scale warfare, and most expected them to struggle. But Jack had just shattered that expectation. He had made them all look weak. The sergeant narrowed his eyes. He had trained warriors for decades. He had seen species with unmatched strength, others with unnatural speed, some with intelligence so advanced they could predict an opponent's moves before they made them. But humans were something different. They adapted. They learned. And if Jack was any indication, they were far more dangerous than anyone had realized. A low chime echoed through the training yard, a signal that the next phase of the program was about to begin. The drill sergeant exhaled, pushing his thoughts aside. He had no answers yet, and until he did, he would do what he always did, test, observe, and push. "Cadet," he said, his voice regaining its usual authority. "You're not done." Jack met his gaze, unflinching. "I didn't think I was." The sergeant's lip curled slightly. "Good. The next test would be different." The course had been physical, a measure of endurance and agility. But war wasn't just about the body. It was about the mind. Tactics. Strategy. Psychological warfare. And if Jack had already mastered the physical, it was time to see what else he was capable of. The other recruits were still watching, a mix of resentment, curiosity, and unease in their eyes. Whatever happened next, one thing was clear: Jack had changed something today. He had made them all question what they thought they knew about humans. And that was dangerous. The next test wasn't physical. It was something far worse. Jack followed the drill sergeant through the corridors of the training compound, the walls lined with alien metals that pulsed with a faint, unnatural glow. The recruits marched in silence, their footsteps echoing in perfect rhythm. No one spoke, but Jack could feel it, the tension thick in the air. They didn't like him. Some were threatened, others just confused. He wasn't supposed to be the one standing out. Humans were the newcomers, the untested soldiers in a war that stretched across the stars. The others had trained their whole lives for this. And yet, Jack had shattered expectations in just 1 hour. The drill sergeant led them into a vast chamber, the ceiling disappearing into darkness. Rows of empty seats curved around them, almost like an ancient coliseum, but instead of a battlefield, a series of holographic displays flickered to life in the center of the room. A familiar voice crackled through hidden speakers, deep and commanding. "Cadets. War is not just about strength. It is about strategy." Jack watched as the holograms shifted, forming a battlefield in midair. Alien ships clashed in the void, explosions blooming like distant stars. Infantry units moved across unfamiliar terrain, formations shifting, adapting. It was a simulation, one that played out real battles from history. "This is your next test," the voice continued. "You will command your own forces. You will face an opponent. Win, or be eliminated." Jack raised an eyebrow. A strategy test? He had expected more physical challenges, but this was different. It wasn't about running or climbing or surviving an obstacle course. It was about something else entirely. The drill sergeant turned, his 4 eyes locking onto Jack. "You first." Jack hesitated for only a second before stepping forward. The other recruits watched, some whispering, others waiting to see him fail. He could feel their stares digging into him. The holographic battlefield shifted. A fleet of alien ships took form under Jack's control, their glowing outlines sharp against the dark chamber. Across from them, another fleet materialized, an enemy force commanded by the simulation itself. The system wasn't just random. It learned. Adapted. It played like a real commander, reacting to every move. Jack exhaled slowly. The interface in front of him showed fleet positions, ship types, energy reserves. He studied them quickly, piecing together a strategy in his head. Begin. The enemy moved first, a standard flanking maneuver, sending smaller ships wide to surround his fleet. A simple tactic. Too simple. Jack had seen this before, not in war, but in something else entirely. A memory flashed in his mind. Late nights at home, playing strategy games with his brother. Long hours studying old battles, reading about generals from Earth's past. Chess, real-time simulations, even historical war games, he had played them all. And now, for the first time, it felt like they actually mattered. Jack's hands moved instinctively, shifting his ships, pulling back just enough to make it look like he was retreating. The AI took the bait, pushing forward, stretching its lines too thin. Jack reacted instantly, cutting off the flanks, forcing the enemy into a bottleneck. A classic maneuver. One the AI should have expected. But it didn't. The simulated fleet crumbled in seconds. The final explosion flickered across the holographic display, and then, silence. Jack blinked. That was too fast. The system should have adapted. It should have countered. But it hadn't. He turned to look at the drill sergeant, expecting some kind of reaction. Instead, the alien's expression was unreadable. His 4 eyes flicked between the display and Jack, as if trying to piece something together. The other recruits weren't silent anymore. A few muttered under their breath, others just stared. Jack had beaten the test, not just beaten it, but crushed it. The drill sergeant stepped forward, his voice quieter than before. "How did you do that?" Jack shrugged. It was just a pattern. The sergeant studied him, eyes narrowing. "You recognize the strategy?" Jack hesitated. He had, but that wasn't the strange part. The strange part was that he had known exactly how the AI would react, as if he had seen this battle before. As if the system itself had been predictable. The sergeant didn't say anything for a long time. Then, finally, he turned to the other recruits. "Next." Jack stepped back, watching as another recruit took his place. The simulation reset, the battlefield shifting into something new. The next cadet hesitated, scanning his fleet, but Jack already knew what was going to happen. He watched as the AI played the same strategy again. The same opening move. The same mistake. Jack's stomach tightened. Something was wrong. The AI wasn't adapting. It wasn't learning. It was repeating. Jack glanced at the drill sergeant, but the alien's expression had shifted, his gaze locked onto the simulation, as if he had realized it too. And in that moment, Jack understood. This wasn't a test. It was something else. Something bigger. And he wasn't just being evaluated. He was being watched. Jack's heart pounded as he watched the next recruit struggle against the simulation. The enemy fleet moved exactly as it had for him, following the same pattern, making the same mistakes. The cadet hesitated, trying to adjust, but the battle played out like a script, predictable and unchanging. This wasn't normal. Jack turned slightly, watching the drill sergeant's face. The alien stood rigid, his 4 eyes locked on the holograms, but Jack caught it, the faintest flicker of something beneath his hardened expression. He knows. Jack had been trained to read people, to notice shifts in body language, tension in voices. The sergeant wasn't just watching the test. He was waiting for something. The battle ended, and another recruit stepped up. Again, the same sequence played out. The AI didn't adapt. It didn't counter. It should have. Even simple tactical programs evolved mid-battle. But this one? It was stuck. Repeating. Almost as if. Jack's stomach twisted. It wasn't testing them. It was testing him. The realization sent a chill down his spine. He had beaten the course. He had beaten the strategy test. And now, it felt like something, or someone, was watching to see what he would do next. Jack's hands curled into fists. He didn't like being played. The simulation continued, recruit after recruit stepping up, failing in different ways. None of them saw it. None of them realized they were locked in someone else's game. And then, the lights flickered. A faint hum filled the air, so subtle that most wouldn't notice. But Jack did. It was low, almost beneath hearing, like an old system struggling to power up. The drill sergeant stiffened, his head tilting slightly, as if he had heard it too. Something was changing. Jack turned to look at the holographic battlefield, expecting another round of the same scripted war. But this time, when the next recruit activated their simulation, the battle didn't begin. The ships just hung there, motionless, as if frozen in time. The room fell silent. Then, without warning, the entire projection shifted. The simulated enemy fleet collapsed into itself, pixels flickering, reforming, rebuilding. The sleek alien warships twisted, reshaping into something else, something unfamiliar. Jagged edges. Dark holes. A design Jack had never seen before. And then they moved. Not like before. Not in predictable formations. These ships weren't following any known strategy. They swarmed, erratic and fast, moving with an intelligence that felt too real. The recruit at the console stumbled back, his controls unresponsive. What's happening? The drill sergeant stepped forward, his jaw tight. Shut it down. A second voice, one of the other instructors, spoke from the shadows. We can't. Jack's pulse hammered. This wasn't a test anymore. The holograms flickered again, and suddenly, the simulated ships turned. Not toward the recruit controlling them. Not toward the AI opponent. They turned toward the room. Jack took a step back, a cold sweat breaking out on his skin. It was impossible. They weren't real. They were just projections. But something about the way they moved, the way they pulsed with unnatural energy, sent a deep, primal warning through his body. Something was wrong. The drill sergeant barked an order, but his voice sounded distant to Jack, drowned out by the rising hum in the walls. The lights dimmed further. The room felt smaller, the air heavier. And then the screens glitched. For the briefest moment, across every holographic display, a face appeared. Not a human face. Not an alien Jack recognized. Something else. It was gone in a flash, too quick for most to notice. But Jack had seen it. And in that split second, he understood. This wasn't just a malfunction. This was a message. And it wasn't meant for the drill sergeant. It was meant for him. Jack's breath caught in his throat. He blinked, his mind racing, trying to process what he had just seen. The face, if it even was a face, had been there for only a fraction of a second, flickering across the distorted holograms. But it wasn't just some random glitch. No. It had been looking directly at him. The hum in the room deepened, vibrating in his bones. The holograms pulsed, the simulated ships now moving erratically, ignoring the frozen recruits still gripping the controls. Jack glanced at the drill sergeant. The alien's normally rigid posture was too still, his 4 eyes locked on the screens, but his hands, they were twitching. Jack wasn't the only one who had noticed something was wrong. Then, without warning, the entire chamber lurched. The floor shuddered beneath them as if something massive had just shifted inside the walls. A few recruits stumbled. A sharp burst of static crackled through the speakers. And then, the lights went out. Total darkness. For a moment, there was only silence, save for the heavy breathing of the recruits. Then, in the pitch black, a voice whispered through the room. Not from the speakers. Not from any of the instructors. It was, inside the room. You are not supposed to be here. Jack's chest tightened. The voice wasn't alien, not like the sergeant's deep, guttural tone. It wasn't robotic either. It was something else. Something in between. The emergency lights flickered to life, dim and cold, casting eerie shadows across the chamber. The holograms were still active, but they weren't showing the battlefield anymore. Instead, they displayed a set of coordinates. Strange symbols. Numbers Jack didn't recognize. And beneath them, a word that sent ice through his veins. Error. The drill sergeant moved first, snapping back to life. Everyone out. Now. No one hesitated. The recruits bolted toward the exit, but Jack didn't move. His eyes stayed locked on the holograms, on the shifting symbols, the coordinates flashing rapidly. His gut told him this was important. The drill sergeant turned, noticing Jack wasn't following. I said move, Cadet. Jack opened his mouth to respond, then everything shifted. A high-pitched frequency tore through the room, a sound so sharp it sent pain slicing through Jack's skull. He staggered, pressing his hands to his ears. Around him, the other recruits collapsed to their knees, groaning. Even the drill sergeant stumbled, his normally unshakable form unsteady. Then, through the ringing in his ears, Jack heard something worse. A door opening. Not the main exit. Something behind the walls. Jack's instincts screamed at him. He forced his body to move, turning just in time to see a section of the chamber split apart. A hidden panel, sliding back into the wall. Beyond it, darkness. A tunnel? A passage? He couldn't tell. But something was in there. The temperature dropped, the air turning sharp, electric. Jack could barely breathe. His eyes strained against the shadows, and then, movement. Something stepped forward. It wasn't like the drill sergeant. It wasn't like any of the recruits. It was tall, its form obscured by the dim emergency lighting, but Jack could feel it watching him. The drill sergeant turned, saw the figure, and for the first time since Jack had arrived at this training camp, the alien froze. The room felt like it had stopped breathing. Then the figure spoke. Not in a language Jack had ever heard. Not in a way that made sense. But somehow he understood. You were not meant to survive the first test. Jack's blood ran cold. His pulse hammered in his ears. The pieces snapped together in his head like a puzzle he didn't want to solve. This wasn't just a test. It had never been just a test. And whatever was standing in that doorway wasn't part of the training. Jack's breath was shallow, his body tense. The figure in the doorway didn't move, yet its presence filled the room like a storm about to break. The air crackled with an energy he couldn't explain, a pressure settling over his chest like an unseen weight. The drill sergeant, the towering alien who had spent weeks breaking recruits with his relentless training, was afraid. Jack had never seen him like this. The figure stepped forward, its form shifting under the dim emergency lights. It wasn't entirely solid, its edges blurred like a glitch in reality itself. It was humanoid, but wrong, as if something had tried to imitate a living being and failed. Jack's instincts screamed at him to run. But something held him in place. Then the figure spoke again. You were not meant to survive. Jack's pulse pounded in his ears. His mind raced through every moment of the training, every grueling exercise, every impossible test. It had been designed to break them. To filter out the weak. But something about the way this thing said it, not meant to survive, it wasn't about the other cadets. It was about him. Jack turned to the drill sergeant, his voice tight. "You knew?" The sergeant didn't answer. His jaw clenched, his gaze locked on the figure. That was all the confirmation Jack needed. This wasn't training. It never had been. Jack was a variable, an anomaly. He wasn't supposed to have beaten the course in an hour. He wasn't supposed to have seen the flaws in the simulation. And now, something was here to correct that mistake. The figure moved again, stepping fully into the room. The emergency lights flickered, and for a brief moment, Jack saw its face. Or rather, the absence of one. A void, shifting and swirling like something reaching through a crack in reality itself. And in that instant, a thought, not his own, pressed into his mind. Erase. Reset. Fix the error. Jack stumbled back. He didn't know how, but he understood. This wasn't just some rogue program or failed experiment. This thing was here to erase him. The drill sergeant moved suddenly, stepping in front of Jack. His voice was sharp, commanding. He passed the test. He stays. The figure paused. The room seemed to vibrate around it, as if reality itself was deciding whether to listen. And then, a shift. The void-like face turned away from Jack, toward the holographic displays. The flickering symbols changed. The coordinates. They reappeared, glowing brighter, locking into place. A new voice filled the room, mechanical, cold. Override accepted. Reset protocol, cancelled. Jack exhaled sharply, but the relief was brief. The figure didn't vanish. It lingered, its presence still pressing against reality like a wound that hadn't fully closed. Then, just as suddenly as it had appeared, it stepped back into the darkness. The hidden passage sealed behind it, leaving no trace it had ever been there. The hum in the walls faded. The emergency lights brightened. The room felt normal again. But nothing about this was normal. Jack turned to the drill sergeant. What was that? For the first time since he had arrived, the alien looked at him not with authority, not with irritation, but with something else. Respect. The reason we train. Jack frowned. That wasn't a test. No, the sergeant's gaze lingered on the sealed passage. That was a warning. Jack's stomach twisted. A warning for what? The drill sergeant met his eyes. For what's coming. Jack didn't ask anything else. He already knew the truth. This wasn't the end. It was just the beginning. Jack's heart was still pounding. The silence in the chamber was thick, but the tension had shifted. Whatever that thing was, it was gone, for now. He forced himself to take a deep breath, trying to steady his mind, but his thoughts were spinning too fast. The words of the drill sergeant echoed in his head. A warning. Jack had come here expecting brutal training, expecting to be pushed to his limits, but this was something else entirely. He had stepped into something much bigger than just a military program. He wasn't just a cadet proving himself anymore, he was a piece of a puzzle he didn't fully understand yet. The other recruits were still recovering, glancing around uneasily. Some looked at the drill sergeant for answers. Others looked at Jack. He could see it in their eyes. They knew. Even if they didn't understand what had happened, they knew this wasn't part of the training. The drill sergeant finally turned back to them, his usual authority returning to his stance. Training is over for today. The recruits hesitated, exchanging uncertain glances, but no one questioned it. They filed out quickly, eager to escape whatever had just happened. Jack lingered for a moment before following. Just as he reached the exit, the drill sergeant's voice stopped him. Cadet. Jack turned. The drill sergeant studied him, his 4 eyes unblinking. Then he said something that sent another chill through Jack's spine. You learn fast. Too fast. That will keep you alive, but it will also put a target on your back. Jack swallowed. So what now? The drill sergeant was silent for a moment before replying. Now, you prepare. Jack nodded slowly, though he had no idea what exactly he was supposed to prepare for. He stepped out of the training chamber, his mind still racing. The corridor outside was empty, the air cooler, calmer. He exhaled, trying to shake the feeling that something was still watching him. Back in his assigned barracks, Jack sat on the edge of his bunk, staring at the floor. The other recruits had gone quiet, each lost in their own thoughts after what had happened. Jack knew they were just as shaken as he was, but none of them spoke about it. Maybe they were afraid of the answers. He replayed everything in his head, the coordinates, the shifting holograms, the thing in the darkness. Why had it called him an error? Why did it try to erase him? And why did the drill sergeant stop it? Jack had too many questions and not enough answers. Sleep didn't come easily that night. Every time he closed his eyes, he saw that faceless void, heard the distorted voice whispering in his mind. He woke up before the morning call, still feeling the weight of what had happened. But he wasn't afraid. No, something else was building inside him. Determination. If this place was more than just training, if there were hidden forces at work, then he needed to know why. He needed to understand the truth behind this program, behind the strange presence lurking in the shadows. And most of all, he needed to be ready. The next day, training resumed as if nothing had happened. The recruits ran drills, sparred, followed orders. The drill sergeant was just as harsh, just as unrelenting. But every so often, Jack caught the way the sergeant watched him, like he was waiting for something. Jack didn't know what was coming. But he had the feeling that whatever it was, it had already begun. And he wasn't going to be caught unprepared again.